On September 11th, an airplane with its radar transponder turned off was stolen and flown from the northeast towards Washington, D.C. The airplane flew through the most protected airspace in Washington, D.C. and was able to avoid the billion-dollar surface-to-air missile system and radar surrounding Washington, D.C. The aircraft then crashed into the bottom floor of one of the most protected buildings in Washington, D.C., right after having skidded off the lawn and hitting the lowest level of that building. Even though top-ranking American officials were usually in the area of the building the airplane hit, they were luckily far away from the impact zone because of construction. The evidence of the airplane crash was concealed by fire trucks and was quickly cleaned up and removed from the scene. The airplane itself and wreckage being carried away were concealed with a tarp. The president was not warned of this attack until 46 minutes after it happened. The result of this attack was the conclusion that security was too lax around the airspace in Washington, D.C., and there had been a catastrophic failure of existing security measures, including the surface-to-air missiles protecting this high-profile target. The funny thing is, I'm not talking about Flight 77 which hit the Pentagon. I'm talking about a Cessna flight that hit the White House, which was stolen September 11th, 1994, and has basically the exact same story that we were told regarding failures of protocol, failures of the missiles to launch and protect the airspace, no video evidence of this happening. The president was conveniently across the street in Blair House when it happened because they were working on air conditioning. There were some temporary bleachers set up in the area, and on 9/11, what do you remember? Oh yeah, there was these big reels that were in front of the area. There's temporary construction stuff set up around.
Because the fact is, despite the billions we spend to protect the president with the latest high-tech weapons, a truck driver from Maryland in a single-engine plane was able to draw dead aim on the White House and fly right over the fence, without the Secret Service doing a thing. Officials point out that the president wasn't in the White House last night, but the plane flew right past Blair House where he was staying, without drawing any apparent notice.
The White House. The good news is President Clinton and his family are safe and sound there tonight. The better news is they were sleeping across Pennsylvania Avenue at Blair House early this morning when White House security was penetrated.
I don't think there's any question that there was a failure of security. An aircraft landed on the White House grounds.
This morning's events began with the theft of a Cessna airplane from a small airport north of Baltimore, about 60 miles northeast of Washington. 38-year-old Frank Corder stole the plane and headed south, flying low and slow, avoiding detection by the Washington area's military and civilian airport radar systems, and entering the aircraft exclusion zone that's supposed to seal off the heart of America's capital city. Corder flew south along 17th Street, just above treetop level, buzzing Blair House, before hooking a J-turn near the Washington Monument and descending directly over formal gardens and temporary bleachers onto the White House south lawn. The Cessna came down 50 feet short of the White House, tearing up grass and shattering against a 160-year-old magnolia tree. Bits of the plane scratched White House walls, cracked a window, and came to rest just 2 floors below the presidential bedroom. Dressed for his early morning jog, the president briefly viewed the wreckage and then later somberly reported to the nation.
We take this incident seriously because the White House is the people's house, and it's the job of every president who lives here to keep it safe and secure.
Treasury Undersecretary Ron Noble drew the unenviable task of telling the White House news media what he knew 12 hours after the event, which wasn't much. So as Noble predicted,
you're probably going to get frustrated. You'll want to know today things that I don't have the answer to.
And sure enough, someone did want the answer to the ultimate question.
Can you tell us, to the best of your knowledge so far, how something like this could happen?
That's precisely the sort of question I can't answer.
What went wrong? One expert suspects human error because of the surface-to-air missile that was never fired.
The Stinger missile most probably would have hit the nose of the aircraft and destroyed the aircraft on impact, and the aircraft would have fallen short of the White House, far shorter of the White House than it actually did.
But another expert thinks the failure may be more systemic, a low-tech threat defeating high-tech White House security operations.
They are prepared to deal with airborne intruders, but of a much higher technological sort. They do have surface-to-air missiles to deal with them. They do have electronic detection systems, but all of those were designed for a much higher level of threat.
The nightmare of nightmares, says Canestraro, is that a Cessna could deliver high-tech explosives.
A lot of terrorist groups do have access to this kind of explosive technologies because they work for states that sponsor terrorism, and these states have made these explosives available to the groups to carry out terrorist actions.
Records of Frank Eugene Corder show no signs of terrorist intent. Corder had been in trouble with police for drunk driving, drug possession, and theft. He dropped out of Aberdeen High School after the 10th grade. His Army career lasted just 9 months, and his attempts to learn to fly at Harford County Airport were shot down by his instructor, Joe Kesser, who'd been warned Corder had a drug problem.
He talked far out. He was a man that he had a champagne taste with a Coca-Cola wallet.
Corder's brother John said Frank had been upset by the recent death of their father and the breakup of his marriage.
We're kind of sorry, you know, he hit the White House, you know. It's kind of a dramatic way to do things. He was that type of guy, I guess. You know, he wanted to be on top. I guess he went out on top.
Frank Corder's terrorist credentials are no better, but he too has forced all the world's security experts to confront the uncomfortable fact: no president, no White House can ever be perfectly protected.
Morning, everyone. An extraordinary breach of security. Early this morning, a small plane, crashing on the south lawn of the White House. There was some damage to the White House. President Clinton and family were not in the White House at the time. For more on the story, we go to ABC's Ann Compton. And do we know whether this was a terrorist attack, an attack designed to harm the president?
That is always what the White House Secret Service presumes. And when the president was not at home when this happened, but he was supposed to be in a bedroom window not far from where the plane came to rest. You can see you can't see really the plane very well, but you see the large magnolia tree, more than 100 years old. The plane tumbled into it, snapped off a branch, and actually crashed into a window on the main floor of the White House. The president's bedroom is upstairs. Just above that is the state dining room, then the president's bedroom window. He is still staying at Blair House across the street because of some air conditioning repairs being done at the White House. What makes this extraordinary is the plane, according to eyewitnesses, came in with no engine on. One eyewitness told me that the plane kind of banked to the right and went right in over the White House. Several eyewitnesses were talked to this morning. This is what they had to say before dawn.
All I can say, it was like a smooth glide. You have a glider, and it was kind of like gliding like that. The engines were off. Yeah, I didn't hear no engine.
How long was the crash?
It was like a boom, just like that, and that's all I saw. I was looking for some smoking fire, but I didn't see none of that at all.
I was on Freedom Park up there, at the top of Executive Park, right alongside the White House, when I seen the light go by and then heard the impact. Apparently it bounced because it was like a secondary impact.
Now, bomb squads have checked the wreckage. They say they haven't found any explosives if this was supposed to blow up, but it still is very, very worrying to the Secret Service. They don't know where the plane came from, at least not yet.
And two quick questions. What do we know about the pilot, and were there any gunshots? The security guards at the White House certainly have the capacity to fire on planes coming into the area.
Well, we have also always been told that there's anti-aircraft missiles implanted secretly around the White House to ward off of a military attack, but apparently no shots were fired. The question of where the plane came from is a real one. The pilot's body is still in the wreckage. It has not been removed. And there is some report that the plane came from a suburban Maryland area, although we're quite close to a national airport. President Clinton was in Maryland yesterday at an event, but so far there's been no official comment on whether there could be any connection.
And no identity as to who the pilot was.
They have not released the identity of the pilot who died.
Thank you, Ann. Ann Compton. We'll be getting back to the White House for more later on.
CBS News White House correspondent Rita Braver has the latest on that story.
The Secret Service says preliminary blood tests show the pilot who was killed when he crashed his plane onto the White House grounds early yesterday morning had been drinking, and that there were traces of cocaine in his body. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee says that presents significant information about 38-year-old Frank Corder.
This was an individual who was perhaps mentally disturbed.
Workers there failed to alert the Secret Service.
It was tracked. They know that from going back, but nobody was watching the radar. And obviously that needs to be corrected.
MD Consini said although there's a hotline between National Airport and the White House, there seems to be no official requirement that the FAA track airplanes that get too close.
There is no paper trail of any executive agreement or memorandum of understanding or directive from the president or anybody else.
With the plane's wreckage cleared away, new bushes already planted, and little evidence of yesterday's crash, the president was asked if he felt safe.
It's unclear whether the Secret Service would have had time to react, even if it had been warned about the plane. But government officials say it's likely that pilots will face tougher FAA scrutiny when approaching Washington's restricted flyover zone. Rita Braver, CBS News.
Not clear then what happened early yesterday morning. A source says radar picked up the plane 7 miles from the White House as it headed south, bypassed the building, then made a U-turn and crashed on the south lawn. The FAA has a hotline to the White House and is supposed to notify the Secret Service whenever a plane flies into restricted airspace. If the system worked as it was supposed to, agents would have been warned several minutes before the crash.
Any time is better from the Secret Service's point of view that they can take what their mission is.
But even with extra time, it's uncertain what defensive measures could have been taken. When a stolen Army helicopter landed at the White House in 1974, agents used rifles and shotguns. One agent involved in that said bullet holes were later found in the nearby Treasury and Commerce departments. Stinger missiles reportedly are on the White House rooftop now, but using them would be tricky.
You have to hit the plane. If you do, then you've got burning debris falling all over Washington. If you miss it, you hit a building, or you might hit an incoming plane at National Airport.
And so what worries officials more than anything is that an incident like this exposes to everyone the limitations of the security net surrounding the White House and the president. Jackie Judd, ABC News, Washington.